Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Happy President's Day. My name is Jenna. I'm the founder and CEO of Million Marker. Today, at Million Marker, we're really passionate about hormone education, and it's really important for us as we test for hormone disrupting chemicals like BPA, phthalates, parabens, so then people can take action and improve and eliminate these exposures. However, there's like many other things that can actually impact hormones. And that's why we're like super excited today to invite Dr. Saru Bala join us. She recently had Instagram reel about 8 myths about periods and hormones. So I asked her to come on to and discuss. And Dr. Bala is a naturopath doctor who practices in Scottsdale, Arizona, and she specialized in balancing hormones and addressing period problems without use of birth control. So let's.
Hi.
Hello, hi, Dr. Bala. Thank you so much for joining us.
Of course. How are you? Can you see me okay?
Yes, yes, yes,
Okay,
it's perfect.
perfect.
Oh, this is so awesome. So thank you so much for taking the time. Could you give us like a brief background about, what led you become a naturopath doctor?
Yeah, so it kind of started with my mom. I always wanted to go into like integrative medicine and do the whole full spectrum of everything as far as medicine goes. And when I was in college, my mom got sick and she was kind of passed around through a lot of different doctors. And finally she saw an ND, and that's kind of where she got most of her hope and a lot more answers and solutions for her issues. And so that kind of spurred me into looking down this route more, because I was like, I didn't even know what naturopathic medicine was at that point. And so I'd shadowed some doctors and I was like, wow, this is exactly what I wanted to, like, the route that I wanted to go. And so I really kind of enjoyed working with them and seeing how they worked with patients, and it kind of all kind of spiraled from there.
So what do you think is the biggest difference between a naturopath doctor compared to, a doctor of medicine, traditional, Western doctor?
Yeah, yeah. So, a lot of what we do is really we like to find the root cause of what is going on. So, if you have hormonal issues, if you have period issues, it's not like, oh, these are your symptoms. Here's a solution for that symptom that you're having. I really like to find out why that's happening in the first place. If you had period pain, if you have PCOS, where is it stemming from? What are the biggest issues that you have going on? Do you have issues with your diet? Do you have issues with your lifestyle pieces, issues with stress, sleep, whatever it is that can be causing some of those hormonal issues? I like to look at your whole life and not just the symptoms that you're telling me, and figure out how we can kind of put all the puzzle pieces together and create a plan that works for you to make sure that we're addressing the underlying issue so that we're actually fixing it versus kind of covering it up with a symptom management solution.
Yeah, so that sounds like a good option, especially for people with hormone issues, because it's like it could be like really complicated.
Right, exactly. Yeah, it could be coming from a lot of different places, or it actually might even be a simple thing. I think a lot of times we overcomplicate it. Might be. Sorry. Okay.
All good, all good. And then really enjoyed your reel about, the myth and about hormone and period. So now let's like get into it. One of the myths that you mentioned is about period is they have to be so painful. I mean, pain is one of the most common symptoms women experience, so it's kind of like blows some of our minds. What would, chronic pain, period pain actually mean?
Usually, if you're having pain with your periods, it can be one of many different things. There's primary and secondary dysmenorrhea. So dysmenorrhea is a term for period pain. So secondary basically means it's coming from something else. You have fibroids, you have cysts, you have endometriosis, you have certain medications that are causing it. There's something else that's causing it. Primary is there's no other reason that you're having pain. And that usually comes from an excess of prostaglandins. Prostaglandins can basically be kind of summed down into quote unquote inflammation. So if your inflammatory load is really high, we're going to see a lot of pain. We also see that happening when your estrogen levels are really high, or if your progesterone levels are really low, or if you have things like insulin resistance that could possibly cause pain or make pain worse. Um, by affecting other hormones. So there's a lot of different avenues that you might be having that pain might be coming from. But the biggest one that we say is that prostaglandin and that inflammation piece.
So are there any lab like a person can take or do to kind of like figure out what's causing their pain?
It's kind of harder when it comes to primary dysmenorrhea to say that these are the labs. You can look at ESR and CRP. Those are just non-specific markers of inflammation. It'll basically just tell you that you have elevated inflammatory levels. So it doesn't really help and say this is where they're coming from. So I don't typically run a ton of labs in that regard for period pain in particular. If there's other pieces that we want to look at, yes, I will run labs, maybe looking at anemia, looking at your thyroid, because that can also cause issues with pain or heavy bleeding. But for the pain itself, there's not a ton of blood work that we can do to see, because like I said, you can see inflammation, but we kind of already know that that's there.
Yeah. So then what are some things that a woman can do to alleviate the period pain?
Yeah. So it depends on where it's coming from. So that's like I know easier said than done. But really figuring out where it's coming from. Is it coming from gut inflammation? Do you have food intolerances? Is there food that you're eating that your body is reacting to and creating more inflammation? Do you have is it exercise? Is it coming from liver metabolism of your hormones? Is it coming from your poor stress management, or is it coming from blood? There's so many different places it can be coming from. But overall, finding what works for you is going to be the most important thing. So if you have, if usually I like to say gut, the gut is the number one place that I like to always start with anything. And so that's usually where I start for most people, because if you're experiencing pain, most of your immune system is in your gut, and pain is a response of your immune system. And so inflammation coming from your immune system, we really want to figure out that gut piece. So what are you eating? How are you eating? Do you have issues with your gut? Which most of the time I find that people with period pain always do. They always have issues with constipation or looser stools or gas or bloating or heartburn or indigestion or nausea or some issue or another. So that's usually where I'll start. What are you eating? How are you eating? When are you eating? And how does it make you feel after you eat? So really kind of figuring out that nutritional piece of food. So we can kind of tweak, okay, is it dairy? Is it gluten? Is it soy? Is it whatever it is? And kind of figuring out the piece that's going to be most beneficial for you to kind of tweak is going to be important as far as nutrition. And then we can also talk about supplements here and there if we need it.
That makes total sense. Love it. I mean, gut health is like a whole other topic. Then I think we're gonna have to invite you back on to talk about just like about gut health. So then, since we're on this topic, what food would you recommend? You know, because gut obviously plays a huge role in period pain, but more importantly, hormone balance. So, what are some food that you could recommend if someone's trying to balance their hormone using, food?
Yeah. So for me, the biggest one that I see, and nobody likes to hear this one, is dairy. I tell people this just because that's the one I see most often affecting people who have period pain. It usually takes about 6 to 8 weeks before you notice that change in your period. So, don't give up too early. That is going to be the biggest one as far as cutting foods out. I also see a huge difference when people start adding in more veggies, because it helps with the liver metabolism of your estrogen when you add in more greens, things like cruciferous veggies like broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, kale. Those kind of things can really help increase that dim estrogen metabolism and get rid of your estrogen from your liver. So yeah, so as far as adding things in, veggies, really big. As far as eliminating, it's going to be dairy.
Yeah, dairy is always a hard one. I think milk is fine, but cheese, oh, so hard.
Yeah, that's what everyone says. Cheese is always the hardest because everything else has pretty good dairy alternatives, but cheese,
Yes.
they just haven't figured that one out yet.
Right. So another myth that you kind of busted is birth control actually regulates hormones. So like, why is birth control given to women who is trying to regulate their hormones?
I think because that's the only solution that anyone has ever done. There just hasn't been a lot of research in women's health, and that's really unfortunate. And I think, there needs to be more of a push there, one for research and two for other solutions. So right now, the only solution that your OB has for you is birth control because it helps to cover up the symptoms. When you're taking the pill, it shuts down your natural ovulatory process. That's how it's preventing pregnancy. And so when that happens, you don't have that estrogen, you don't have that progesterone, you don't have all of those hormonal influences that were causing you the symptoms that you were having before. And so it looks like, hey, my symptoms went away. But then as soon as you get off of birth control, those symptoms start to come back. So that's kind of why I say it doesn't regulate your hormones, because if it did, once you got off of birth control, your hormones would be back to normal, but they're not. They kind of go back to where they were. Sometimes they're worse than where they were at because you weren't addressing that underlying problem. So that's what I mean when I say they're not regulating. It looks like it is because you're getting that bleed. When you stop taking the birth, like when you take that week of placebo pills, you get the bleed and it's like, oh, well, my periods are coming regularly. And they're not. That's just the bleed that you're getting from the withdrawal of those hormones from the pills. So it's not truly your period. It is a bleed and it is still shedding the lining, but it's not happening because of what your body is doing. And so that's what I like to help people figure out is, first of all, what happened to your periods? Why are they irregular or off or whatever's happening to them? Why is that happening? Because once we get to the root cause of it, you don't need birth control to cover up the symptoms. You figured out the symptoms on your own.
Yeah, so then if a women who already have hormone balance were given birth control, are there additional problem that birth control can actually cause?
Sorry, say that.
So if like, if a woman already have some hormone issues and then she was given birth control, could this birth control causing additional issues?
Um, it depends. So the birth control itself isn't necessarily causing issues. It's more just covering up the issues that you already have. And it's kind of like you're just sweeping it under the rugs. So if you have something like PCOS, or PCOS seems to be kind of emerging, and especially this, I see this a lot in like teens and like younger women. Maybe you're like 20 years old and you are kind of on the brink of possibly getting PCOS, and they're like, you know what, here, take this birth control pill. You take it for 10 years, you're 30 years old now, and you never address the issue of why you're having those irregular periods or why you had PCOS. And so then you get off the pill and you're like, my period never came back, or I have a lot of weight gain, or I have all this facial hair, I have hair loss, or I'm not ovulating. Like, what's going on? And that's because the pill just kind of like kept everything surface. So we didn't address those insulin levels. We didn't address those testosterone levels that were causing them to be like that in the first place. So birth control isn't necessarily causing an issue. It's just covering up these issues, and you're not addressing them. So you don't know what's going on.
Yeah, makes sense. Then since we're talking about PCOS, you also mentioned that women have PCOS could actually get pregnant. So we have many women in our like program also have like experiencing PCOS fertility issues. So what are some things that women with PCOS can do to improve their chance of conception?
Yeah. So with PCOS, the biggest piece is really figuring out why you're not ovulating. The anovulatory cycles are kind of a hallmark for PCOS. And so when you're not ovulating, usually the biggest thing that we see there is those insulin levels. If your insulin levels are really elevated, that's going to cause issues with testosterone to be really elevated. That's going to cause those anovulatory cycles because your estrogen levels are low because testosterone levels are high. And so it's kind of this cascade of events that happens, and they all stem from that insulin level being so elevated. And so how can we monitor your blood pressure, your blood sugar, and make sure that you are kind of balancing it throughout the day? So the biggest thing I like to say, it comes down to nutrition. Your blood sugar comes from what you're eating, right? And so what you're eating and how you're exercising. So if you can, at a bare minimum, go for a walk for 10 minutes after you eat each of your meals, that in and of itself can be really helpful. And then any exercise you want to do on top of that is also amazing. Strength training is amazing. Cardio is amazing. Whatever type of exercise you like to do, I'm never going to say no to. And then another piece that I like to talk about is protein. Protein really helps to stabilize your blood sugar. So if you're not getting enough protein with each of your meals, or if you're not getting any protein with each of your meals, that's a huge place to start with. I like to say, especially if your insulin levels are elevated, 30 grams of protein with every meal, and make sure you're eating breakfast. That's a really, really big one for PCOS to really help stabilize those blood sugars so that we can get those insulin levels down and get you ovulating again.
So this is a really like a whole program approach. I love it. And people really need to think about their lifestyle and then thinking about the whole picture. before they just go down or choose a certain route just for themselves.
Right.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
no, this is amazing. So I also you also mentioned like getting pregnant won't fix hormones, right? Like why won't it?
Yeah, I think a lot of women get told that like they have issues with PCOS, they have issues with endometriosis, whatever. Their doctor's like, get pregnant, it'll fix everything. And it's not a fix all. Sometimes for some people it does do like a big reset and things do shift. That can happen, but also that doesn't happen. Or sometimes people's issues get worse. I've seen lots of patients whose endometriosis actually got worse after pregnancy, or their PCOS got worse after pregnancy, or whatever it was. So pregnancy can kind of go either way. It might like completely solve all your problems, or it might make things worse, or it might just stay the same. So you can't just say, get pregnant, it'll fix everything, because that's, kind of negligent to say that it's a fix all for everything. Um, so yeah, so it can kind of go in many different directions with pregnancy, because what happens is your immune system is kind of suppressed during pregnancy, and a lot of things can shift, especially with things like endometriosis. You may not have as much of that inflammatory piece, and that might kind of reset there. Your gut health shifts around pregnancy, your microbiome shifts around pregnancy. So that might have just been enough for someone to see a nice hormonal shift
Mhm.
postpartum. But for many, that's not always the case.
Wow. You're like such a great source for wealth of knowledge. This is so cool. So tell us like what are some of the service that you provide? Because I think that would be really beneficial for viewers that who want to get on the more personalized approach, joining the programs and everything.
Yeah, yeah. So for right now, you can see me in person or virtually one-on-one. I love to work with people to kind of help figure out what's going on with their hormones. I also have an online course that goes through basically everything I do for my patients for period pain and heavy bleeding. So either of those are kind of treated similarly. So I kind of put them together in one course. So that's another thing I like to do. And then I'm also working on a few in-person courses as far as like fertility and nutrition and how all of that is going to go. So if you're in the area, that is definitely something that is kind of coming up this year.
Wonderful. So what does like a one-on-one consultation with you look like?
Yeah. So, oh, that's a good question. Um, so the first visit is usually longer because that's that intake visit. I really want to get to know what your life looks like on a day-to-day basis. So what are you eating? How are you sleeping? How do you wake up in the morning? How do you go to bed at night? What are you doing throughout the day? How are your stress levels? How are your energy levels? Do you have brain fog? Tell me about your poop. We talk a lot about your poop. That's a lot of what we talk about. I like to hear in details about your period. Like, is there pain? What are your symptoms? Is it, what's going on as a whole with your body? I really like to kind of figure that out. So that first visit's about, if you're in person, it's about an hour long. If you're virtual, it's about 45 minutes. And if we need to do any lab testing, I will give you that lab order at that first visit. We'll kind of talk about anything that we would want to check in on as far as thyroids, if we want to look at those inflammatory markers, if we want to look at antibodies, if we want to look at iron, whatever it is we need to check in on. We'll kind of get that lab order done at that point. And then if we need supplements on board, we'll talk about supplements. If you're here in office, I have some here. If you're virtual, we have an online dispensary. Um, and then we'll talk about your nutrition. We'll talk about exercise. We'll talk about those other lifestyle pieces, anything we need to add in, and we'll kind of come up with a plan for you. And it doesn't always mean that I'm just telling you what to do. It's kind of more of you tell me where you're at. I tell you what I think needs to happen. And we kind of meet in the middle of what are you able and willing to do? Here's what I think you could do. Here's what I think you need to do. And we kind of meet in the middle, because it's not just about me saying, here, do this, because if you're not willing to do that, and you're not able to do that, we're not going to see progress. So that's kind of that little dance that we do in the very first visit of, okay, where are you at? What can we do? How can we kind of meet in the middle of what works for you? Coming up with a plan together. And then all of our follow-up visits are really just troubleshooting. How are things going? We usually meet probably every 6 to 8 to 10 weeks. So depending on how you're doing and how much support you need, we might meet a little bit sooner. We might meet a little bit later if you're kind of on a good path. And then, yeah, we'll just troubleshoot what's going on. How are you doing? Do we need to change anything? Do we need to add anything in?
Wonderful. And I also saw there are many, many impressive testimonials on your website. So for anybody who's interested, definitely like check it out. That Dr. Bala did wonders for many of her patients.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, so thank you so much for joining us. So like be sure everybody to follow Dr. Saru Bala at Dr. Saru Bala and on Instagram. And then you can also learn more about Dr. Bala's service, book a call with her at drsarubala.com. Or click our LinkedIn bio or tapping the post promoting this IG live. And then we're gonna have to have you back to talk more about hormones and gut health and everything.
Oh yeah, that's a whole I can talk about that for days.
So thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jenna. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you everyone for joining.
Bye.
Bye.